Oh, yes. Welcome in to Snow The Goalie, the only Flyers podcast, the People's Podcast, the Players Podcast, the Prognosticators Podcast, the Pedialyte Podcast, the award-winning podcast. Oh, yes, that's right. We were named the silver medalist for hockey podcasts in America.
Really?
From the Sports Podcast Awards. They just announced that today. So we are now an award-winning podcast. You know, listen, some people call us an award-winning podcast. Some people call us
silly podcast.
But you know what? We remain the only Flyers podcast. All right. So a big welcome into everybody, and we can now welcome, as you can see on the screen, a presenting sponsor to the Only Flyers podcast, Pack Horse Moving. We'll be talking about them a little bit later on in the show. But if you're looking for a moving company, or you know somebody who is, and pretty much everybody seems to always know somebody who's ready to move, Pack Horse Moving. In the description of the episode, you can see the link. Use promo code SNOW. You'll get $77 off of your next move. So we'll be talking about them a little bit later on in the show. But guys, jam-packed episode. The All-Star game is this weekend. Travis Konecny's there. The Flyers entered the All-Star break on a skid. And of course, we will, towards the end of the show, to kind of help the people who might be affected by this or triggered by it, we're going to talk about Carter Hart being charged by the London police. So that'll be at the end of the show. So a big welcome into everybody who's joining us. Guys, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great. And for people who think I see Barry Schaefer saying that I'm taking a nap, I'm actually sending a text message, Barry, just so you can see it's my phone, right? All right, thanks.
He was texting Torts.
Yeah, we're having a little conversation. He won't answer my questions in front of everybody, so he has to answer them via the phone. Yeah,
I can't believe. You know what? I'm now ashamed of myself that I didn't create a clip of I'm not answering any of your questions. So maybe we'll have that for the next episode. But
okay.
Listen, this is gonna be a lot of fun. I think that there's a lot to talk about, and the big thing that we have right now. First off, let's get to brass tacks. The Flyers entered this All-Star break on a 5-game losing streak. And if you're looking at the schedule going forward,
you want to fucking ask me how I was doing?
I said to both of you, and he answered.
Oh,
you didn't.
I said, I'm sorry. You're off your gameplay, Russ. You know what? You've had too much time off, and you're not easy to. You can't elapse time the way you did.
That's right. You know what? I missed this. Hold on. Less than 3 minutes in, and we had a Bundy bomb. Ant just walked off the show. That's great. All right. So this is.
I'm doing well. Get back to your point. Thank you.
I didn't get that.
Shut up, Siri. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. You know what? A good point here by our good friend Andrew Fawcett. You know what? I actually thought, when you get like 50 people tell you how you play, and like 45 of them said, you know what, Bundy, you actually played okay out there. Like, you did good. I fell once in the second. That's because I got flat-footed. I was sore. Like, I was drained, guys, by the end of that weekend. It was a lot. We had a Thursday function at night down at Bullies, and then the next day the game, and that was a whole day event, and then got to get right back up after it and wake up, take some Tylenol, and get right back over to the great Hall of Fame game for Mark Recchi. And I'm sore. I'm not gonna lie, there's still a couple little pieces of me that are sore. I think it's worked its way from my ankles to my back, and I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not, but this is what happens, right? This is why skating, and anyone that plays even men's league, like if you're off the ice for 2 weeks and you go back, I'll give you an example. Travis Konecny, if he didn't skate, guys that are off this week for the All-Star break, they will feel it when they come back, because it's just a rhythm you build as a skater with your hands and puck movement. And if you're not doing that all the time or using those muscles, you're gonna taste it a little bit. And I know I'm not alone. It was a great time, though, guys. Just to wrap up that weekend, I had an amazing time. Shout out to a lot of people. Brad Marsh did a great job. Cindy Stutman, who's a frequent guest of ours. They just did, and I'm sure I'm missing others, but I just wanted to thank the Flyers for really building a family party on the whole weekend. I really felt, and someone asked me, I think it was Wayne Fish after, said to me, what was that like? And I really felt like that was the hard reset on everything that's taken place early, of what's to come down the road. And it was a real a reunion of a lot of greats, a lot of former faces, guys coming back. Mike Richards. I mean, that was an unbelievable weekend, right? Richards back, Joe Watson playing his last game. There were so many things to think of on that weekend. Skating with Kimmo Timonen, and something I'd never done, just in terms of what it was. Seeing the trainers, Turk, Derek back over there, Rock. I'm not going to lie and tell you that seeing Craig Berube on that bench didn't make me be like, woo, boy, what could be? He's a guy that's just won it, a great friend of mine, and Jonesy, and I know how much they love him. But there was a lot of stuff, man, that really went on in that game and in the event. And we had a great time seeing the 2/3 of the Legion of Doom with Mark Recchi on it. I mean, it was just cool. It was really cool. Mark Howe again out there. I got to play with Dennis Seidenberg, who probably was still the most fit guy. And it was really, really an awesome event. And you know what else? The Boston Bruins made it a great event too. So not for kicking their ass on the Saturday main game, but for really bringing a great group of alumni out. And we had a wonderful time. And again, I thank everybody that came down Friday night. We're part of Saturday. I had a wonderful time. And I mean that, like, it was super duper to be a part of it. And there's a lot of really big thanks to go out and especially to you guys. You covered that, guys, both of you. That's meaningful. People get access to guys like Recchi and Richards and stuff. So terrific job by you and Russ, Anthony. And I just wanted to thank everybody that listens to our show and is a Flyers fan, because that was really, really something else to be a part of.
Thanks, Bundy. It was fun. I mean, we had a blast. We were having the time of our lives in that locker room. And some great stories that came out of it. I mean, Mark Recchi was awesome. Mark Howe was awesome. You were there for Mark Howe.
Donald Brashear at the end.
Brash was fantastic.
Michael Layton just dunking on Anthony was great.
Yeah. Michael Layton coming after me.
We had 6 guests, right, Ant? Who else did we miss? Chemo was on.
Bundy and then we had Chief and
me and Mark Howe were on together.
Berube, that was right. Yeah.
So we had them all. It was great. It was a really good night, and of course, adding Mike Richards the next day, we had him for pregame on Saturday, which was pretty cool too. So, but still, with when Recchi telling the story with the diaper man was still part of my favorite part of that weekend. That was such a great story. And Bunny, I don't know how you never told that story before.
You know what? It was one of those stories in life that just passed. Kevin Stevens stuffed a shitty diaper, like folded up there and not exposed, but under my seat in this car I had. And I'll tell you what, that some bitch smelled like that for a month. And I couldn't figure out. I fucking looked everywhere too. Like, I mean, you ain't kidding. And he dug it up under the driver's seat.
One day
I couldn't bear it anymore. I'm like, I can't find it. I can't find this anywhere. So somehow I moved the seat right up, and I could see, like, underneath this little diaper piece hanging. And I knew it was already Kevin Stevens. And I said, fuck, I'm going to get that prick somehow. And I probably did. But that was good. That was good. I mean, I've seen some other stuff too, guys. Like I went to the worst one, actually. And listen, I dished out probably the most of everybody that had played in that 12, but I got it back too. Took it in stride. I remember one year I left practice, and I was driving over to Vito's Pizza, and this guy's in the car next to me. I didn't know who it was. He's like, "Look at the back. You got to pull over, man. You got to pull over." I'm like, "What the fuck's this guy doing?" Like, he must know. I'm like, "All right, man, you got it, buddy. Go Flyers." And I'm like, and so and then I pull in the Vitos and I go look behind the car. There's a fucking huge billboard. Like, I'm huge, like 3x4, and it says, "I molest farm animals." What? Yeah. You know who did it? Number 10. Number 10.
No.
LeClaire. That's great.
No.
You know what happened to him?
Johnny Hockey.
He had a sex object taped to the front of his car, and that was on that thing for 3 weeks.
You guys are the best.
That's been fun. Was fun, right? Like, you know what? It's it's great fun. Like, with team, like stuff, like it's stuff you bring in the room and you share it with the guys the next day. Nobody gets upset. I mean, it's funny. It's crazy, but that's what it was. And you know what? Like, I don't know if there's enough of that anymore. I don't know if cell phones and everything has ended the times of this, but it was harmless. You know, it was just harmless fun. And then you end up getting the wives involved. Like, what the hell's on your fucking car, Johnny? You know, like, that kind of stuff. You hear these stories. And, she's from Boston and Tina was. So again, anyway, let's move on, guys. I'm glad I got to open up and share a few stories.
Yeah, he just drops a few, like, really great bombs here. And he's like, let's just move the conversation along. All right, fine. Yeah. So, I feel like there are more stories to tell, and I feel like this offseason is going to be the time to tell them and to bring some of these guys on for
thousands of stories. Yeah.
Okay. this team, we're going to bring it back to this now. So this team was on a 5-game skid, and it was kind of accentuated by a loss to Boston the day after that Alumni game. And when we talked about it going into that game, as we were doing our predictions, I think my big takeaway and my big point at the time was this team, for whatever reason, and I don't know if it's just across the league, I don't know if it's just the Flyers, but it feels like anytime there's one of those like big, hey, this is a big event night, this is a meaningful night, the team, for whatever reason, just doesn't seem to like get that boost, that adrenaline boost or whatever it is. And so they lost 5 consecutive games. And then in the aftermath of that game, as the media were asking questions, Anthony asked an actually good question.
For once.
And about whether it was the guys in the offensive zone doing things that they probably aren't skilled enough to do. Like Torts did his thing. Torts did his thing and didn't answer the question. But and Bundy and I had this conversation after the game and after that happened. And it was like, all right, well, so the coach is deflecting again, which is what he's done for the most part this year with any time this team has struggled or lost games. He has not thrown the players under the bus, but he has certainly like gone out of his way to either make you feel like everything's fine or find something else to kind of deflect and distract. Do you think that was what happened that night? Because obviously they got picked up by like BR Open Ice and Chicklets who still haven't sent the link. Like, is that what's going on? Is that what that was? Because you were in that room. Is that the impression that you got walking away that night?
I mean, I do think that, he does his deflecting thing when he does, time and again. I mean, I think it's a thing that he does. But I really felt like leading up to the question that he was pretty open up to that point. I felt like the answers that he was giving to that point were, so here's where I'm a little bit of an old school reporter in this sense, right? So I know reporters go in and you have to ask, and I've done it. We've all done it. You kind of take turns. You got to ask, somebody's got to ask the first question and somebody's got to ask the second question. And it's like, there's got to be a few things you got to talk about. But I think that we're in an area or time period when the time for follow-up questions isn't really afforded to us anymore. Mm-hmm. I think that these press conferences are so short and quick that you just got to get as much as you can out about different topics and hope that you get a good response. I still try when I'm asking a question to make my questions follow-ups. In other words, try and further the information that he's already provided. Again, my question was based off of 2 different answers that he had already given. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to link them together to find out exactly if that's what he was talking about, maybe get into it a little bit more. And I think that's where he decided he was going to deflect. Maybe he didn't want to give up that information. Maybe he saw that it was me asking it and felt like that was a time to really, keep going with his, his routine that he does from time to time. It's okay. I mean, that's if he wants to do, that's the way it's going to be. But I mean, if he thinks I'm going to stop asking questions, I'm going to keep asking questions. I mean, that's never going to stop. Right. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I think that part of it is him deflecting, but I also think that we are limited in the amount of time that we're given here. So you can only ask so much and only glean so much from it before you then have to try and figure out other ways to get the information.
But in fairness, though, too, to Ant, you look around the league, and not a lot of other coaches that do that. I mean, how many other guys take 30, 40, 60-second post-game press conference after a loss? It's about information, right? And if you're not getting the information from the head of the snake, then information gets created. Deflecting's fine. There's times for it. There's times when guys will come up in playoff series, and I watch this. I've watched it my whole life. Where a coach can get kind of sucked in a little bit into a playoff mode where the games are really rich and there's a lot going on and someone goes after a player and there's a way to look after that. But at game 50 or 48 or whatever it is, I mean, are we really doing that? Again, I'd move past it. I guess nobody told him that we were partners with the team. And I really don't give a shit if he knows that or not. I'm not here to powder his rear end. I mean, that's not what I do. We talk hockey. We have a great outreach with our fans and the Flyers community. So if he doesn't want to fucking answer the questions, that's great. But I'm not going to sit around and watch him again, you're not Larry Brooks. This ain't the Larry Brooks show. We don't work for the New York Post. So that's what I'm saying is that, I always think it looks better as a professional. And believe me, I've done a lot of times where I say off the cuff of what's on my mind. Answer the questions, give people the time of day. It only takes another 40 seconds for your appearance to look good. And listen, there's people that polarize the whole moment like, you know what, Anthony, you got what you fucking deserve. He's got a long memory. Bullshit. They lost their 5th game in a row. They're staring down the barrel of the gun called Florida coming out of the break. You know what? Maybe that was a good time to deflect, but I still wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, and I get it. And to answer your question, Bunny, so how many coaches do this? And I there's not many. That's for certain. I mean, Torts is, first of all, Torts is his own animal, right? It's a whole different breed with Torts than anyone else. But he is a bit old school in a sense. And I will tell you that, you say, well, does anybody else do it? Well, not really. I mean, I'm trying to think around the league if there is anybody else. But the reality of it is that in most cities that there's NHL, people don't. It's so far off the radar that people don't really pay that close attention to it, right? I mean, okay, in Canada, of course, obviously the cities up there, they care. But if do you think that John Cooper's got a tough time in Tampa? Like, I went and talked to him after the Flyers Tampa game. There wasn't even a Tampa reporter there. They had their in-house people, but that's it. There was no other reporter to ask him questions. So like that kind of buddy conversation can happen a little bit longer. They're not worried. He's not worried about anybody going to put something that could potentially criticize him. Whereas here, for all the criticism that Philadelphia media gets, it's a passionate sports town where everybody cares about what is said. And so therefore any question can be interpreted any way that the coach or player wants, and they're going to take it a certain way. I think that it's a blessing and a curse for being in Philadelphia, and Torts just happens to be that kind of incendiary personality that when it hits the way it does.
Yeah. But again, and I look at where they're at. They've had a really good year. Like, they've done a lot of good things, right? And Torts, and we've given him credit. Like, we've never deterred from him. We've never shit on him, as a coach. But I'll tell you what, nerves come around to anybody. I don't know how many coaches here have had 10-game losing streaks, but I know Torts is one of them. And I'll tell you what, he doesn't want another one this year because you're sitting at 5 now. And if you get to 10 again, a lot of what he's been preaching this year, unfortunately for the way the start went, gets left by the wayside. And that's a reality. Like, that's a true reality. He's sitting on one last year. The last thing he wants is another one of those on his resume this year. So, especially after that loss. There was a frustrating loss against the Bruins. It was. They got dominated in a lot of ways. And I'll be honest with you, Anthony said it too. The Flyers in some ways were lucky the Bruins took their foot off the pedal in that game. Like, they got 5-0 or whatever it was, and that was kind of it. Like, they could have, if they kept going at that pace, it could have got real ugly. And we both looked at each other, Anthony, and said that about 5 minutes into the second period. And even further, we said they've definitely just kind of edged out now, and they've let the game take place.
Yeah, and you mentioned the potential for a 10-game losing streak. And I don't think it's going to happen. I could be wrong. They could lose 5 in a row more. But it's not like they're going to come out of this break and face, a bunch of bad
That's
teams.
what I mean. Yeah.
At Florida, home against Winnipeg, home against Seattle, home against Arizona, at Toronto, and then you're at New Jersey
before the Blackhawks, who are the easier team, right? So
then after the Blackhawks, if God forbid something happens there, then you've got the Rangers, then you've got the Penguins, then you've got the Lightning. There's not like a 2 or 3 game window coming out of this break that's like, okay, cool, you can recoup. Like, even if you lose to Florida, that you go, oh, cool, we have like three games that we could win 2 of 3 and kind of get back on track.
I wrote about this the other day. They have 32 games left for this season. 15 of them are against teams that are ahead of them in the standings, and 6 are against the teams that are chasing them in the Metropolitan Division. 3 teams that are right behind them in the Metropolitan Division. That's 21 of the 32 games are going to be hard games. And then you look at the other 9, you never could take any team for granted, right? So, I mean, you really don't get a breather where you have a couple of them in a row until April. I mean, really, that's really when it comes in. But at that point, who knows where you're at by that point, right?
Well, and then let's not forget, like, what we've talked about since the very beginning of the season, even when they were winning, was you're going to have to be, and I think I said this the other day, but you're going to have to be like 7 games over 500, in my opinion, by the deadline to have a realistic chance of being a playoff contending team. because once the deadline passes on the 8th, the next day you're in Tampa. Then it's San Jose, Toronto, Boston, Toronto again, Carolina, Boston, Florida, the Rangers. Like, it ends up being another murderer's row. And there are a few like lighter teams sort of towards the end, but then you have divisional opponents again. They have the Rangers and the Devils again, kind of close it out, and the Caps. Like, if you're not considerably over 500, 7 games, you're not going to make the playoffs. Again, in my opinion, like you could do the whole like overtime loss thing and you could try to like finagle the math, but then that's where I'd come back to, hey, it's better to not make the playoffs at that point. Like, if you're going to be that like barely making it in or limping in team, given where you're at in this rebuild, then you're probably not better off making it. But if you're strong, and if you're strong down the stretch and you enter the playoffs on a heater, then all of a sudden you can be that Torts team, that Columbus team that has the ability to upset a team in the first round. So
we need more guys like that. This is optimism right here at its finest.
There you go, John. Look at John.
No matter who the team that they are playing, they can beat any team. And John, you're not 100% wrong. You're really not, because we've seen it this season.
Yeah,
they've beaten some really good teams this year. Mm-hmm. I think that the only teams that they've not looked good against are Boston, obviously Saturday, and the Rangers when they played them back on the day after Thanksgiving, Black Friday.
What about Ottawa?
That's true. They played bad against. They've lost twice to Ottawa, right?
Yeah, it was bad.
But it's so funny. Like, they've actually struggled against like some of the worst teams in the league, but have played well against the better teams in the league. So no, I don't want what I've said, John, or I don't think what anybody said here to be taken as they can't beat these teams. They certainly can beat them. I think what we're just saying is that when you play one good team after another, you have to be, and you're the type of team that the Flyers are, you have to be on your A game to beat those teams on a nightly basis, to win multiple games, to win a lot of them. I mean, can you steal one here and there if you're playing just average, and maybe you get up for one game, but then you're back to being average again? What good does that do you, right? I mean, let's be honest too. I mean, they got Seattle coming in on next Saturday. After Florida, Winnipeg, obviously we know those are two really good teams. We know Winnipeg plays great defense, one of the best, maybe the best defensive team in hockey. Seattle doesn't give up goals. They for their faults, and they have faults too. They don't score either, but they don't give up goals, right? Arizona's a plucky team. So, I mean, like, those teams you see there, those are teams they should beat, especially here at home, but they're not going to be, I don't think that there's a walkover in there. Let's put it that way.
Which again leads back to the coach is going to have to answer questions down the stretch. He can't do the 30, 60-second press conferences. I mean, he could try. He certainly is within his right per, the agreement with coaches in the league and everything. Like, I'm just here so I won't get fined. You can do that. But in a sports market like Philadelphia, eventually that act will wear thin. And while it's funny to dunk on Ant right now, like, eventually it won't be funny. And like, I can make the case that it's not. And I would also just really quickly, I have a very simple message, right? And my message has been pretty clear and concise this whole time. Don't be a bitch, and don't gaslight. That's it. Those are my only requests of the coach. Don't bitch out when you're asked hard questions in a press conference, because it's your job, and don't gaslight. And when I say don't gaslight, I don't just mean like, don't say that, like, Bundy, there was that one game, there was a 5-on-3. They didn't score a goal, and then he came out in the post game and he was like, "Oh, I thought we actually did a pretty good job." And it's like, well, no, you don't believe that. Like, nobody believed that, right? But at the same time, like, also don't gaslight about like why you're not answering Ant's questions, because you in some way were responsible for the absolute public shaming of the player that you're now going to bat for, multiple times benching him, getting the ire of the Philadelphia fan base on that man.
I told you
season,
that.
Last
I've never seen a guy get treated worse than that guy did by a coach. I said that 3 weeks ago.
You did. And so I just want to be really clear that, like, I said something on Twitter the other day, and somebody like kind of took it the wrong way. What I said was, you can't be the same coach who did that, who publicly embarrassed and shamed a player in Kevin Hayes, publicly shamed and embarrassed James Van Riemsdyk, who was a good locker room guy. You can't do that and then turn around and like do this whole bullshit thing where like you get up on your soapbox. As we said on this show at one point, the death threats and all the other stuff to Kevin Hayes are totally unacceptable. We didn't condone them. We didn't tell people to go like message this guy on Instagram. And at the same time, I also would be remiss if I didn't point out, and somebody said like this was like downplaying death threats, but like fucking death threats happen on social media a lot, and they happen probably more than people realize. It's players, it's entertainers, it's musicians, it's actors, and hell, I bet if we opened up Anthony's DMs, we would also find some pretty nasty shit in there, not just from this, but from another time as well. And so again, not downplaying it, but I am going to point out that like that as the soapbox that he's going to stand on, and that's going to be like his thing, and he's going to pound that drum. He can do that, but it won't work in Philadelphia. This shit won't fly. If this team hits a longer losing streak, or this team really hits the skids in the second half of the year, 30, 60-second press conferences is not going to fly. There will be apathy that'll set in with the fan base, but the people who actually care and the people around the league who actually care, that shit won't fly. So good luck, but don't bitch out and don't gaslight, and we're cool. We'll be fine. I saw somebody say, is Torts going to come on the podcast? Pretty much no chance he's going to come on the podcast. Why? Because we're not talking about about adopting dogs. Sure. But there's another reason, and it's because we'd actually ask him legitimate questions about what's happening with this team. And we don't let people wiggle their way out of questions. We don't need him on the show. But I do hope, and as somebody else asked over here, is there going to be an effort to try to smooth things over with him and Ant? I would certainly hope so. I would hope that the professional coach of a professional sports team would sit down with a writer that they're going to continue to make the public whipping boy because they don't have those veteran players that they want to embarrass and use as the message senders, right? I hope that at some point they have a chat. And if they don't, fuck it. But you better not continue to do this in public, or we will actually have an issue. As a show, as a partnership with the team, we'll have an issue. And if we do, we'll have that. We'll have our moment. We'll settle it. But I hope that it gets taken care of. We have the All-Star break here, and I'm done. I'm now done talking about John Tortorella. And if you have anything else you want to say, but I've now rambled, and I'm fucking done, and I want to be done with it. And I hope it gets settled.
Yeah. Well, I'm not the kind of person who will play out what happens behind the scenes in conversation. So, I mean, look, if he continues it, he continues it. If he doesn't, and we have our little powwow and everything goes great, whatever, and we smooth it over, then that's fine too. And you won't see me respond any differently in either way, regardless of what happens. So, but yeah, I mean, I will keep it. I won't make anything public about any of that behind the scenes stuff. That's just not going to happen. So if people are, because I'm sure people will ask, right? But I don't care if it's like the best conversation in the world, if it's the worst conversation in the world, if it happens, if it doesn't happen, none of that stuff will ever be public because that's just not how I.
Well, Dan Hilferty loves our podcast. That matters.
Well, that is true. I'll also point out, and this is not a shot at the current.
Just remember one thing, guys. Hold on.
Yeah.
The night that all that stuff went down, there was 3 media outlets the team went to. NBC Sports Philadelphia, 97.5 The Fanatic, and Snow the Goalie. That's it. That was the only 3 they went to.
Yep.
That should be all you need to know.
Yeah, it's true. And I'll just simply point out that there are good coaches that are available now and will be available over the next few years. And that I hope that this team does whatever it's going to do. And I hope that everything works out and all that. But you're going to find yourself in a position here as you're rebuilding this thing and as you look at some of the guys that are in the pipeline. And at some point, this is going to be a very attractive destination for all kinds of coaches from all different walks of life to potentially step in if things don't improve and if they don't get better. So we'll see. We'll see. All right, I want to get to a guy that had a lot of interest in the offseason and that reportedly the Flyers had been offered at least one first-round pick or a high pick of some sort, and that's Scott Laughton, who's had a very up-and-down season, and I would argue that his downs this season have been significantly bigger downs than we're used to seeing and more prolonged down periods. But Darren Dreger put out that the Flyers, while they don't want to trade Scott Laughton, could perhaps entertain conversations. So, Ann, I'm going to go to you. Do you believe that they're actively fielding calls for Scott Laughton, or is this perhaps the organization trying to use some of the media outlets to perhaps drum up conversation and make it more publicly known that Scott Laughton may or may not be available?
Well, if you took the time, Russ, to read my story on Crossing Broad from yesterday, you would know that I've already addressed this before.
The people listening, Anthony.
I'm going to answer the question, but I'm just saying it was addressed yesterday before Dreger put his tweet out. Yes, I do think they will take calls on Scott Laughton. I'm not 100% sure that they want to. Well, I think Drager's right when he says that they're not keen on moving him. But I do think that there is a price that maybe last year, if they, let's just say that they got the same offer this year that they got last year, I think they might take it this time around. And the reason, and say, well, why Scott Laughton's not having as good a year this year? Why would anybody give up a number one pick for a center that's not having a good year? When you consider how thin the center market is this year, you might be willing to overpay. Just saying. Like that's so. Like I think if it gets to that point, if it gets that high, then I think the Flyers say, love you, Scotty, but we're going to move on. I don't know if it gets that high though, and in which case then they weigh the value of keeping the player versus the value of the offer that they're getting, and say we'll keep the player, thanks. I think that's the same concept that they're going to take into the Nick Seeler discussions, whatever they might be. I know they would rather keep him, but I think that's the same conversation there. I think that the names that are more likely to go, although right now I think that the interest in Sean Walker there's some interest, but it's kind of been a little bit lukewarm. I think at this point, I think it's way too early for Sean Walker to get traded, and I think that's the reason why it's lukewarm. But I think teams are just kind of weighing their options to see what defensemen are going to be out there. I think Ristolainen is where it gets interesting. I think that's the one where there are teams that are interested, but it's the money, right? I mean, that's how much are the Flyers willing to eat? I mean, they're already eating Kevin Hayes, part of Kevin Hayes' contract. They're already on the hook for the buyout for Tony DeAngelo for next season. How much more do you want to keep adding to that if you're looking at next year and saying, well, okay, we came close this year, we just didn't get there. How much do you want of that salary cap do you want tied up in money for players that aren't playing for you, right? So you're almost better off keeping Risto at that point than you are in sending him out. So it really kind of depends on what the return would be there as well and how much you have to eat. I think those are the two the names. Obviously, I still think Morgan Frost is going to be a guy that they dangle in some capacity. Maybe that's part of. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe you can put that together. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think there's going to be one where you're like, wow, they traded him. And that might be the one, where you're like, I don't think it's so much of a shock, but where you're kind of in the moment saying, wow, he's had a better second half and boom, he's gone. Yeah. But that is what's going to happen. And what's necessary to move the needle forward. And again, standing pat, it's not going to suffice. Somebody else put something out on Giroux the other day. Again, I say no. I'm not going to be as animated. I'm done. All right, I'm done. We're done. I know they're happy. This almost feels like the Flyers. Remember they had like bad starts and they go on this epic roll late, and it's like, here we go. Well, that's kind of what Ottawa's doing, but they're just so far out. I think it's going to be near impossible. But they're playing good going into the All-Star break, and no.
Yeah,
okay, there's one other guy that
before you do, Russ, I want to pop this up because I did want to mention this. So Vineet mentions, he says, I think teams like Calgary and Winnipeg would go after Risto. The former only has 3D returning next year, and the latter can attract free agents. One of the things that I wrote about was Calgary is a team that has reached out to the Flyers, just expressing interest, not saying that they made an offer or anything like that, but more along the lines of expressing interest. So just thought I'd mention that as well. Anyway.
Well, here's the thing. We're going to get to another player who's been mentioned as a potential trade candidate, but like when you get traded, the number one thing you need is a moving company. And that's where our new friends, and for me, they're old friends, but for us, they're new friends at Pack Horse Moving come into play. Pack Horse Moving, if you look in the description of this episode, they're the number one moving company in the tri-state area. They're not saying that, I am. And I
3 locations, right?
I can tell you that from personal experience. They have 3 locations. They've got Burlington, New Jersey. They've got Wilmington, Delaware. They've got Norristown, Pennsylvania. If you're in the tri-state area and you're looking to make a move, you're going to head over to their site, packhorsemoving.com.
That's like a triangle.
What?
That's that's like a triangle. If you go from Norristown to Burlington to Wilmington, they're in that really triangle there. Yeah.
If you head over to packhorsemoving.com/Snow The Goalie or the description of the episode, if you use the code SNOW, SNOW, when scheduling your next move, you'll get $77 off of your next move, no matter the size. You're going to tell them, if you just call them, if you look up their phone number and you call Pack Horse Moving and they say, how did you find us? You say Snow the Goalie, promo code SNOW, okay, $77 off. Now I'll tell you, I've moved a few times. Guys, you've been, I think, established where you are for the most part. And I know that you had a move recently, like the last year or so. I don't think you use Pack Horse Moving. But I seem to remember you might have asked for help.
I use the SanFilippo family moving company.
Yeah. Don't be like Anthony. The people who say, hey, I'll give you beer and pizza for the help to move, never worth it. Trust the professionals. Pack Horse Moving. 2 years ago, we bought a house in the midst of that like crazy housing bubble. It was the middle of it was the end of the summer. We were getting ready to go back to work. My wife was going back to school. The kids are going back to school. We found Pack Horse Moving, and they moved our family. They did a fantastic job. The people were nice. It was a 2-day move. They did a fantastic job getting everything out of the old place, keeping it at their facility, and then dropping it at the house the next day. They were so quick. They did such a great job. We didn't wake up the next day finding nicks out of our dressers. They didn't break a TV. They did a great job. They were professional. They were kind. They were friendly. I can personally attest, Pack Horse Moving, if you are planning a move, they're the way to go. Description of the episode, you can find the link. Call them up today if you're in the tri-state area. Again, the promo code is SNOW, and I'll let you know, apparently they're going to be launching in other states soon, and they'll also accept the promo code SNOW. So if you know somebody who's getting ready to move, Pack Horse Moving, promo code SNOW. Thanks to them for being our presenting sponsor. All right, the guy that I was talking about that has a big weekend coming up is also one that fans have been asking a lot about. Could he be a trade target? And that's Travis Konecny. Now, it seems like he's an integral part of what this team is trying to build. It seems like the coach really likes what he brings to the table. Danny Briere had been part of, kind of getting his game to the next level prior to taking this role, working with TK. Jonesy seems to like him. Hilferty they all seem to like Travis Konecny. So from that end, I can't imagine they would. But is there a way or a package that a team could entice the Flyers with? You look at the package that just went out for Lindholm. They don't play the same position, but is there a chance that a team could try to blow the Flyers' doors off and acquire Travis Konecny? And Ant, do you see a scenario where they could potentially move their all-star?
I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, could your hypothetical scenario happen? Sure. I mean, who knows what people would offer, right? Mm-hmm. I already put that up on the screen. You didn't see it.
I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Go ahead. I was talking. Go ahead.
You were too busy talking. That's all right.
I was.
And it lived up there for 30 seconds, too. Because
God bless. By the way, David Waitman says, bravo, Reed. That was all from the heart. Go ahead, continue, man.
Yeah, it wasn't from the heart. Otherwise, you would have seen the comment up on the screen.
Anyway, I didn't read that. That was me.
Okay,
I'm serious.
But I don't think
in front of me.
Yeah, what is reading up their site?
I wasn't reading up their site. Okay, go ahead.
Point is that you would really have to give up a lot to get Konecny. I think at this point, I think they look at what he's been and what he's done and how his game has grown, and they look at it and say he's still young enough that he could be part of this going forward. He's got a really palatable contract. It really ends up being team friendly when you really think about it and look at it, right? I don't see Travis Konecny being moved out of here. But again, teams get silly sometimes. I don't think, just like our podcast, they don't do it though. Usually at the trade deadline, a guy with term left on his contract like that usually does not get moved at the deadline because a team doesn't want to take a chance on bringing in a guy and then he doesn't help them, and then it's like, oh man, now we're stuck with that contract for the next couple of years, right, or whatever it is. Those kinds of players, if you're going to trade them, you usually trade them in the off season. So I don't look at the trade deadline and say, oh, Travis Konecny is going to be moved. I just don't. Crazier things have happened, but I don't see it.
Bundy?
Yeah, I agree with Anthony. I just don't see it right now. I mean, he still their marquee guy, in terms that he's still growing. I think he's got another step above him still. But he's found a groove in this league. And if I will say this, if you knew that you were going to trade Travis Konecny and you knew that you were getting a 1C in here that would be here for a decade, I would move him in a second. I will always move a winger for a center if the center is further advanced or there's more potential. So I never say no, but wingers, some of them, if you can find guys like look at Florida didn't think Owen Tippett could play. They weren't sure he could play. They gave up on him. So they did. I mean, you could have just probably held on to that at the end of the day. But that's what happens. Guys grow a little bit, and it might take them a little bit longer. But it took Konecny a while. He was an all-star before, but that's when the team was really down. And they needed somebody to play. But again, I don't really believe outside of Alex Ovechkin that there's a winger that you can build your team around. And then even now, like that's come to an end too in Washington, right? Like he did it, but they had Backstrom there. Yeah, that's all I got to say for it. I love Travis Konecny. I love what he's done for this team and the way he's built his game. But if you get a 1D or a 1C, and that's part of what your projection is, you feast away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so Dave Wallace brings this up. He says that the Flyers should throw a shit ton of money at Elias Pettersson if he's available in the offseason.
I'm not certain. I'm not certain that they're going to go after free agents, high-priced free agents in the offseason.
He would fit the bill, though, wouldn't he? Like he would fit the bill for something that you would need for an extended period of time. It's just it might be too soon.
I get it, but you're, in other words, you're not going to lock in or go after that piece that you feel you need to make you a contender until you know that the rest of the team is ready to be that contender. And so, like, that's their plan, right? I mean, just think about where they're at and say, maybe not next season, but the season after that, and look at who those free agents are after next year.
So and again, absolutely. I'm looking at this one too, just about where's the Mishkov? Not a winger you could build your team around. Yeah. Mishkov how tall is Mishkov?
5'9".
How big is he, Anthony?
I think it's 5'9", right?
5'9". He's small. He's not a big guy, but so, I'm not 100% sure of his exact height, but it's below 6 feet. Let's put it that way.
So right now, if you look at Mishkov, amazing talent,
5'10" per Google.
Unbelievable shot, right? First of all, who's going to get him the puck here right now, right? Like you look at Ovechkin, he's got all those goals. He had one of the best feed men that we've seen in the league in the last 15 years at Backstrom, and someone's like, he's not chopped liver, but people don't understand what I'm saying is that when you're building a team, your core has to be that number one center. That's why that's your meat and potatoes and your top defenseman. Get good goaltending. But I'm not taking a shot at the wingers. I'm just saying is if your winger has the same value as the center, it's the center all day long, especially a center with size that can skate, make plays. We have a really good version of Coots who's, been out. But I'm just saying this again, people get this fucking or whatever. He's saying they're not building a team. That's not true at all. They have a goal-scoring guy, but I'm telling you that they need someone to get him the puck, and that's why the center iceman, for so many reasons, is so important, defensively and offensively. If you get a great two-way center, I mean, there's guys in the offseason that who's the guy the Capitals pick? Leonard, right? Is his name Leonard?
Yeah.
Big center iceman, right? And a lot of people thought that would be a Flyer mold. Now, he'll never have the sexiness of Mishkov's game, the way he plays in it, but he's a guy that's a big two-way center. I don't know how he looks down the road. I don't know. We'll see. But that's what I'm talking about. No, Leonard is a winger, they were saying. But the center iceman to me is a linchpin on any team. And the years the Flyers had great years was when Lindros was dominant, Keith Primo was dominant. We had big time first 1C centers.
Yeah, and when it comes down to it, the most important positions are number one defenseman, number one center, and then your goalie. Mm-hmm. Those are the three most important things. And I'm not certain that the Flyers have any of them right now. I mean, they might have the number one goalie. We don't know. I mean, we'll get into Urson a little bit here later in the program, but you don't have a number one D right now. You don't have a true number one center. I mean, look, Coots is a great player, and he is what he is, but he's more likely a 2 than a 1. You don't have any of the three main ingredients that you need to be a Stanley Cup contender right now. So to look at potential players in the offseason, go out and sign this guy, go out and sign that guy, If you don't have those three players, you aren't going out and signing anybody. You shouldn't be anyway. Because if
that's
you do,
exactly right.
If you do, then that's malpractice because you're not building the team properly.
It's what the former president and GM of this team would have done, right? It's the ultimate try to make the splash move. It's that meme of the Bugatti under the little carport next to like the kind of like not great looking house, right? It doesn't make any sense to go out and get that primo guy when the rest of the team just isn't up to snuff. Now, you guys are mentioning, they don't have that true number one defenseman. They don't have that true number one center. And like now, in fairness, you don't know what your goalie situation is because as we get to our last topic here, which is going to touch on the guy who's in net and the guy who no longer is, we will now issue the required trigger warning here that if what we're about to talk about with Carter Hart and being charged in London is something that is not comfortable for you to be part of or for you to listen to, we'll talk to you next time here on the show. We have shows coming up, soon with Morning After and Press Row show and all that. We'll be happy to talk to you then if you have to duck out after this. But Carter Hart is now officially, we can say this because his attorneys put it out, but he's been charged with 1 count of sexual assault as part of the reopened investigation into this Hockey Canada situation from 2018. And it has now caused a ton of issues, and we've said this consistently, so let's make sure we put this out, that the alleged victim here, who is part of this and who the police are trying to get justice for, is going to have to go through a lot here. This is going to be awful. And now 5 players who have requested this indefinite leave of absence, they're all either have turned themselves in or have been instructed to turn themselves in, face charges, all that. So Carter Hart is gone. They moved him today to the non-roster position, which, Ant, I want you to talk about here in a second what that means for the team, cap-wise, what does it mean for them in the future. But these guys are now tied to this. No matter what happens, no matter how this investigation ends, if they're cleared, if they're not, this will always be with them. And now the question that I think a lot of people have had is Carter Hart done? Even if he is cleared, will he ever play a game again in Philadelphia? Will he ever play a game again in the National Hockey League? Should he be allowed to? All that. Like, people are going to have a ton of opinions. We can't get to all of them. But from a pure hockey perspective, they moved him to non-roster. What does that mean for the team right now?
It just basically means that they can carry another player on the roster. He's just considered a player that they own his rights, but he's not with the team currently. So yeah, he's. I mean, he's still counting against the cap right now. He's just a non-roster player, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
And his contract ends at the end of the year.
Correct.
At which point he would have become an RFA, or is set to become an RFA.
Yeah. So I mean, just I checked on this the day it happened, and then I checked on it again yesterday, and it was just a procedural thing, and there was no reason why he was the last one or anything like that. It was simply a procedural thing that he ended up being the last one to become non-rostered of the 5 players. And the Flyers aren't really worried about it. I mean, it's just, it creates a spot on the roster now so they can call somebody up and fit them in. And as far as what about the, Jesus, money's counting against the cap. Yeah, but you know what? They haven't put Ryan Ellis on LTIR. I mean, you laugh.
You're right. Yeah,
but the reality of it is
he's still getting paid.
Well, he is, and he's only on regular IR, so he's not on the long-term IR. So that $6.25 million, even though right now, if you look at the Flyers, they say at the deadline they have $900,000 in cap space, and that's it. Mm-hmm. Well, they could get more than that if they choose to put Ryan Ellis on LTIR. So it really wasn't anything that the team was in a hurry to move Carter Hart off because they needed the roster spot or whatever. I mean, the timing of things, they had enough players. They were playing at home. They were, Lehigh's real close by, so you can make that transaction day of game if needed somebody from up there. Cal Peterson was here on an emergency loan, which is you're allowed to do for a certain number of games. So there was all kinds of things that just they didn't need to move Carter Hart at the moment. And that was what it was. But now he's there. So, and that's it.
The next question, I guess, and I see this here, and a lot of people have been kind of asking this sort of thing, but is the league waiting until the official press conference before doing anything with the players or their contracts? Was taking so long? We've kind of talked about this, I think, in the past, but even if the league were to do what I want them to do, all right, I've been clear about this. These guys, pending whatever this investigation is, should be out of the league. They should be indefinitely suspended. And then the question is about applying for reinstatement, all that. Could the league invalidate those contracts? I guess in theory they could. Could they make it hard for these guys to ever play in the league again? They could. But the problem is the Players Association, because the Players Association isn't just going to allow it to happen. For better or worse, they're going to advocate for the players. Is that where this is going to end up, Ant? Could the league look to take drastic action, but then it gets held up because #lawyers? Is that what's going to happen? Or?
Yeah, but let's put it this way. I mean, you saw the reports out of Canada that said that if this goes to trial, you're probably looking at 2026 before it ever reaches the trial period. So all the players have claimed that they are not guilty, and they're going to remain that way. They're going to remain not guilty until they are proven guilty, if in fact that were to happen. And so if the league wants to do something like that, they're going to get sued by the Players Association. So it's really going to be a mess. It's going to be ugly. And so what will happen, we don't know. I do think February 5th, when they have the press conference for the London Police Department and they officially announce the charges, I do think there will be some kind of reaction by the league at that point. That being said, I can't see any way that even if this drags on to 2026, that any of these players come back and play in the league before then. I don't think that there's any way that can happen. So
yeah. And they may, and the other thing too, I don't know the legalities, but they may not be able to get back in the U.S.
Yeah,
which was something else.
Yeah.
There's I've traveled before, and if you have a DWI, for example, here in the U.S., they can block you from going into Canada, and they will. So again, you're dealing with a whole different set of circumstances here. That's a real mess. It really is. And, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that came out this week. I know people were talking about Calgary's statement that they issued.
Fuck. That was bad. I don't know how you, and I think they made it worse, Bundy, because their second
statement bothered me more than their first one.
Yeah, because the first one said that Dylan debate was going up because of mental health reasons. But that second one said that they had no idea why he was taking
here's this is what I can say. Okay. We've heard this, and we've heard because we didn't have anything confirmed, because we don't have sources up in the London Police Department, right? If I had a source in the London Police Department, I would have felt fine reporting what I had heard, but I don't. Okay. So I couldn't report anything, but we had all heard this since July of 22. Now, if I heard it, if you heard it, Bundy, he was a former player. Even if we've heard it, you have to think that every team in the league had heard it. Okay. And now let's look at what the Flyers did this offseason, right? We know that Danny went out and they traded for Cal Peterson. We know that he signed Sam Ersson to a contract. We know that they gave Kolosov his contract. We know they drafted 2 more goalies. You don't think they did all that knowing that this was potentially going to happen this year? So for Calgary to sit there and say that they were completely caught off guard and had no idea this was going to happen, that's BS, man. That's total BS. And that's why that statement bothered me more than the original one.
And if Calgary,
I went to high school with the Calgary GM, Craig Conroy. Went to Northwood together. Great guy, great player. I don't know what happened with this one, but I mean, he's a stand-up guy. Like, you saw the piece with the assistant GM that passed away, like how good Craig was to him. Yeah. He's a solid human being. I can say that. This was something, I think, where people were like, oh, fuck, what do we do? Oh, my God. Fucking tell the truth.
Yeah.
Just lay it out there. This is it. It's not gonna. It's not gonna make you look any worse. The whole situation sucks. It sucks for the victim. It sucks for everybody because it paints a huge brush across so many different things. But not lost in it at the end of the day is that there is a victim that's come after players and accused them of it, and it has to be investigated, looked at, and the lawyers, unfortunately, guys, as we've said for over a year now, it's going to be all lawyers, right, Anthony? Everywhere.
Yeah, I mean it is, and that's that's the other reason why nobody could talk about it.
Yep.
I mean, really, nobody could talk about it because you don't know what the charges are. We didn't know if there was one charge per player, if there was going to be multiple charges. We didn't know if it was going to be 5 players.
There was also the
players, like
Westhead, and the other reporter.
Thing. That's where I'm completely confused.
So there are two things. One, Westhead, and I forget what the name of the other reporter was. One had put out that, and again, I don't like these terms. There's the gang element because that would take a longer potential jail sentence. Right? There's the sexual assault, and then there's gang sexual assault. Has a longer potential prison sentence. Instead of 10 years, it'd be 14 years. So no one knew that severity either. Now, Bundy, your question is a totally valid one, and I hope that by February 5th, we get clarity on this. I don't think that Gary Bettman's going to talk about this or take questions this weekend at the All-Star game, which is also like the timing of this. We said a million times, like, holy shit, like this is like of all the times we thought it was going to happen in the offseason when like they would have been able as a league to try to act like it didn't happen or like that they didn't have to address it and it didn't have to be a quote unquote distraction. But like Bettman's going to get asked about it for sure.
Well, and don't you think, I mean, let's be honest here. I mean, this again, and I don't know this for a fact, but why is the London police press conference Monday and not Friday?
Because, in fairness, because there were a few people with like legal expertise who said they typically give 1 to 2 weeks for the players to officially turn themselves in. No, I know what you're implying. Yeah, I know what you're implying.
So that they don't, so the league doesn't have to answer the questions when Bettman faces the media because he can't say anything until the charges are official. I mean, he'll give some comment. He'll give some random comment that that's been prepared and stuff like. But it's a way for the league to kind of push it aside again, and just put out statements and not have to answer questions about it. I get it. I understand. It's cool. It's like last week.
Remember, I got a call last week from someone I never know at CNN. They wanted me to come on, but I don't know what to say. They got a legal host at 10 o'clock at the 10 o'clock hour. There's nothing. I don't know what to say because the stuff comes out like there's all reports. So everybody wants to jump the gun on everything. But I know one thing, boys. I ain't no legal mind.
Yeah.
And so again, but it's a shame all around. It really is.
You mentioned that in the original investigation there were eight suspects or 8 people who were allegedly involved in whatever happened in that room that night. And the only thing I can think, and again, this is why February 5th's press conference, I'm assuming there are going to be a lot of questions about it. My assumption is that when they reopened the case, they figured that 3 of the people who might have initially been investigated, they didn't have grounds to pursue charges there. They didn't think it was a strong enough case. I could be wrong, but that is my legal inexpertise. That would be the only reason I could think of. I'm sure it'll get asked because that has been another question. Like, where are the other 3 people? And then you get the people who, the innocent until proven guilty, who like really that was their first reaction. Those are the people who say, well, if 3 people got cleared, then why are we doing this with the 5? We're not doing this. Like we're not playing this game. It's like we're not fucking doing this. And if your first reaction to this news was that, I don't know what to tell you. I will say, I think it was Nick DeCristo up top. This is like the kind of thing I feel bad for, obviously beyond just the victim. Nick DeCristo says this: my 10-year-old became a goalie because Hart was his favorite player. He's devastated. And that is the one thing. And again, I say, these guys might end up getting cleared. They might not. It's always going to be with them. From now until the end of their playing days, this will be tied to them. And there are going to be a lot of, and if it hasn't happened already, there are going to be a lot of parents and a lot of families that are going to have to talk to their little kids whose favorite player was Carter Hart or any of these other guys. And they're going to have to try to figure out a way to have that conversation about like, he's not going to play again, or he's not going to be here, or like, there are obviously going to be people who are going to look, and we don't have an answer on this. I certainly would like to find an answer on this, but People asking like, is there a way to get a name removed from a jersey? Is there going to be an organization that's going to do that? Will the Flyers allow for people to get like their jerseys renumbered or put a name on the back? Like we'll inquire, because that has been a question as well. I saw another thing in here that, somebody said there should be like a program where proceeds are donated to like RAIN or to another one of the, abuse charities, which I think at some point like that might come up, but
I'll just answer this because a few people have asked, guys. So for the locker room mentality, it's disappointing because they had a good tandem going so I'm just thinking how I would feel. The same, when you hear it, you have to realize that player's not going to be around the team for a significant amount of time. It's like being traded almost. So you have to move on. You just got to go play hockey. And they always say, you don't worry about who's not in the lineup at night, as a player. So from a professional standpoint, you move past that. And that's all I can say about how that would impact the other players in the room.
That makes sense. And last thing here, Brandon Ficar, I think, has a really good point here. I think that there's like a certain age maybe that okay, I've young kids, so we've had to have this conversation, I guess. But like the conversation would be about treating people's bodies with respect. And I guess you can have that conversation depending on how old your kid is and how comfortable you are. I will tell you that like the way that the world is now, like the way that you don't feel like you can trust certain people, and like there are all kinds of questions about like handling and your kids and everything. Having the conversation with your kids about what is okay, what is not, and about communicating and advocating and all that. I think it's an unfortunate situation on a lot of levels, and I feel especially bad for those people that are going to have those conversations with their kids. And it's a shame on a lot of levels. But I want to just say to the people that like, barring there being some massive development here beyond what has happened, I don't want to talk about this again. Like, I think that we have covered this as well and respectfully as we can. But like, for all intents and purposes, he is no longer part of this organization. He's no longer part of this team. He will probably never again suit up as a Philadelphia Flyer. He might never suit up again as a member of the National Hockey League. And if any of these guys are eventually found guilty, or if there is something, I hope that whatever the justice system in Canada brings their way is deserved and earned. I want justice for everybody in this situation. And I think that's probably a place to end it, unless you guys have anything else that you want to throw in.
Nope. I have one other thing. I love the fact that we have the 3 panels on the screen to show us, because if people had an opportunity to see just how much gesticulating you do when you talk, they would be completely and utterly annoyed. See, Bundy and I can see the full screen of Russ Joy in the bottom on our screens that the people can't see watching on TV, on YouTube, right? But we get to see you, and you are so physically animated every time you speak. You use your hands, and not just your hands, use your arms and shoulders, and every part of your being is moving when you speak. I see what you're doing right now.
You can see that, can't you? You can see that, can't you? The people can't, but
yes, I can. Yes, I can. So I just thought I'd throw that in as one last thing there.
Anyway, a big thank you to everybody who listened. Big thank you to everybody who hung in there with us through the end of that. And again, like, we'll cover things as we have to. We meant to get to the Sam Emerson thing. Bundy's got a thing that he's got to get to. I've got to get to a thing too. We have a lot to talk about with the goalie situation. So there's your cliffhanger for next episode. As we look ahead to what is about to happen, the Flyers obviously still on break, All-Star break. Travis Konecny, All-Star game this weekend. Next week, the Flyers are in Florida on Tuesday for a game against the Panthers. We'll do an episode the next day. It'll be either the morning after recap, or it'll be a regular episode of Snow the Goalie. They are back in the Wells Fargo Center next Thursday against the Winnipeg Jets. We'll be doing the Press Row show also Saturday and Monday. So we have 3 Press Row shows within a few days in the following week. What, Ant?
By the way, you know how Allison has our very she's in on every show. She comments from about everything we do. She has said in the past that she's never had an opportunity to leave us a 5-star review. Do you know that she finally did?
Did she?
Finally figured out a way to leave us a 5-star review. I don't know if you want to get to it, if you want to save it for the next episode.
Let's save it for an episode where we know everybody's going to hang in. Yeah. Where everybody's going to hang in, and I will love to read that.
Allison was able to get it to us. So
awesome, and we'll get to it on a happy episode. So big thank you to everybody. We will be back, as I said, beginning of next week with an episode midweek. And I'm going to be dropping all of the interviews that we did from the alumni game, plus the Mike Richards interview. Those are going to be going up on the YouTube channel. So if you don't want to, kind of skip through episodes on YouTube or whatever, we'll have them up there. Enjoy. And for Ant, for Bundy, I'm Russ. Thank you again to our sponsor, Pack Horse Moving. Looking forward to doing some good stuff with them. So don't forget, promo code SNOW. Get $77 off your next move. So for these guys, I'm Russ. We'll talk to you next week here on Snow the Goalie, which remains the only Flyers podcast. Talk to you soon.